This is the Naval podcast, where we talk about how to optimize your technology, life, and mind. We're joined by special operations veterans, entrepreneurs, investors, and others who have overcome difficulty to make it to the top of their craft by staying in the fight. So, what is your name?
My name is Adam Karaoguz, and looks like Karaoguz, though, if you look at the way it's spelled.
Rock and roll. Where'd you grow up?
So I grew up actually here in the Finger Lakes, which is part of Western New York, supposedly carved by glaciers many, many moons ago.
And then as a kid, so when I came up here, it's super blue collar, lots of flags, lots of woods, lots of fields. What was your childhood like?
Yeah, so grew up small town life, ride your bike around. I think about it now and it's like, wow, it's quite different from, the way kids grew up today. But yeah, grew up, I could ride my bike all over the town of about 10,000 people, ride my bike to the bookstore, library, and then started running. So I ran track and cross country growing up, and that kind of helped develop like mental toughness that would come in handy later. And yeah, so I worked. What did I do? So I bussed tables, I waited tables, I developed x-rays before that job became obsolete.
Did you get into trouble when you were a kid?
Yes. Yeah, I definitely got into trouble as a kid. I made a lot of poor decisions, which is like, it's come in handy now, raising children of my own. I made a lot of dumb decisions when I was a kid. It reminds me, I was talking to one of my troop chiefs, and he was talking about, doing the security clearance investigation, and the investigator's like, did you get into trouble when you were a kid? And he said, yeah, the normal stuff. and the investigator's like, what's the normal stuff? And he's like, yeah, shoplifting, vandalism. And the investigator's like, what? That's the normal stuff? But yeah, there was a lot of up to no goodness for a little while. Not like, you're getting sent away to like a home stuff, but just the more innocuous, some garden variety vandalism, shoplifting, and then getting into high school, obviously the bonfire parties, the keg parties, all that sort of things that you get up to no good in a small town.
You were obviously a SEAL for a long career, which we'll get into, but leading from that as a kid, lots of library, lots of books, a little bit of trouble, a good bonfire, backcountry, being raised up in that kind of environment. You ended up enlisting as an undesignated seaman, which in the Navy is an E1. It's the lowest rank, the lowest status, the lowest responsibility. And I'm just curious, how did you end up there?
Back in the day, it was called the Dive Fair program, which was like the pathway to buds. So I was in the Dive Fair program. Then I switched to nuke on a sub. And
so
then,
you did want to be a SEAL?
Oh, yeah. Oh, I wanted to be a SEAL. Yeah, I wanted to be a SEAL though let me back up. So 5th grade, I wanted to be a Marine. That's really kind of like...
What got you?
So it's interesting, like the power of images. So if you remember in Boondock Saints, they were like, there's this whole bit where they're like making fun of rope, and they're like, you always have rope. Like Chuck Norris always has rope. And so there's this image of a Marine with like black face paint, and he's got rope coiled on his shoulder. And I was just like that. I'm like, man, I want to be that. Like
Boondock Saints, rock on. Nice.
Yeah. I wanted to throw in a Boondock Saints reference. But so I want to be a Marine, 5th grade, 6th grade. And then this is people are either going to chuckle or they're going to cringe. But watching the movie Navy SEALs, there's a scene in the beginning where Hawkins wakes up, Charlie Sheen's character, wakes up on the beach. And I actually have a false memory of the beginning of this movie. Like I've invented a beginning that never happened. But in my beginning, he wakes up and he stands up and there's like a woman's high heel, like in his, like, was it like there, like crunched against the sand when he stands up, and then it cuts to a cruise ship. And the implication was like he jumped off the cruise ship and like swam ashore after like a wild night. That is a complete fabrication in my mind. But what actually happens, he stands up and then they're like, where's Graham? He's getting married in 45 minutes. And like in that moment, I was like, I want to do what those guys do. And I don't know what that is about, right? It's like there's an element of like roguishness or rascality to being a frogman. And that attracted me. I don't know why, but that did it. These guys that could just do anything. They can go in any domain and excel. And there was something about that was very like attractive.
So there's a pivot from Marine to that. Did you read Rogue Warrior by chance?
Of course. So it all came out when I was in high school. Yeah, all those books. So I read like the first 4, I think, when he started to venture into like fiction and that. But yeah, obviously the like bench pressing in the prison yard in winter and all that stuff.
So if you had the option to go nuke, that means you obviously had the intellectual capacity for college. Did you think about going to college first, or was it straight up, I want to drop out, I want to go to enlist right now?
Yeah, so my family couldn't afford to pay for college. I didn't really put together like I could take out loans at the time. So this is like mid-90s, late 90s. And I like looked at ROTC, but I didn't really apply for like a ROTC scholarship. So I really didn't like put it 2 and 2 together appropriately for like college to pay for it myself. So I was just like, well, enlisting is, this is what I'll do for now.
So let's get into it. So you got in, you were thinking about, you wanted to go teams, you thought about nuke, ended up undesignated seaman. How did that happen?
There was actually like a sub cook. I was going to be a sub cook in my contract. And then, ended up like lost all those and then basically just came in undesignated. And then it's, the recruiter sells it in a favorable, they put lipstick on that pig, right? And they're like, well, you go in there and you check out all the jobs and you can kind of like figure out what job you want to do, and that sounds great in theory. In actuality, it's like, yeah, you're in deck department, bro. Like that's your chip and paint. Like that's what you're doing. And that's what I ended up doing. But I loved it. I loved being a bosun mate. I got to BM2 on a ship before I went to Buds in about 2.5 years. And then like, I was lucky I had a chain of command that they're like, yep, you're a hard worker. We'll support your package to Buds. I've heard tons of horror stories of people that they were hard workers and their chain of command's like, nope, you're a hard worker. We can't lose you. But I was lucky. I was fortunate. And they supported me. And then I got orders to Buds in fall of 99.
1999. So 2 years before 9/11.
Yeah.
And your class was unique. I read about your class when I was getting ready to go to Buzz through Dick Couch's book. So maybe talk about what.
Yeah.
So we've talked about Buds on the podcast before. Maybe talk about what it's like going through Buds and then knowing you were being fully documented the entire time.
Yeah. It's like, I thought that book was lost to the mists of history, but it's definitely, it's still out there. So I think I may have a record for like the shortest amount of time at Buds because I checked in on a Friday. We started PTRR, which is like the 2-week like pre-training. It's called something else now, but basically it's a 2-week pre-training before you start first phase. So I checked in on Friday. That started on Monday, and then I went straight through the class, didn't get rolled, and then graduated. So I was literally there 6.5 months. But I checked in on Friday, and the first thing I remember walking across the grinder, and I saw, the officers have like that line on their helmet, just a solid line to denote their rank. And I saw an ensign like swabbing the grinder. And for me, this was like a revolutionary experience. I was like, how is there an officer swabbing the grinder? Like, isn't there another like, enlisted guy that can do that? And so that was my first like, whoa, like this is not going to be like what I'm used to in the Navy, seeing an officer doing like manual labor like that. But I went in, met the OIC, and then, got into that horrible building 602, which is just still like, I just have nightmares about that building. It was just so awful, but just dropped into like intense, the intensity, I remember the intensity of those first days where it's like, you're up at 3 or 4 in the morning and you're just getting like completely hammered and like dudes are just dropping like flies. They're just quitting left and right. But then you're like on the beach, it's like, there's this like, you're on this like amazing real estate, patch of real estate. And then you have weekends in Coronado, and it's just like, Coronado is just a magical place to be. Yeah. So it's just intense. I don't know how else to describe it, but like I wrote a poem about it because I was like, this is so like such a weird experience. I want to try to chronicle it, but it's just tight, like the guys that you go through Buds with, you're just so tight with because you've experienced all this like massive suffering together. So Couch. So, we knew off the bat he was watching us, and I think I felt like relieved because I was like, well, if they can't kill us because he's watching us, But if they kill us, at least he'll be there to like tell the story.
Was he like rolling around in a minivan? Was he running with you?
No, so he would just kind of be there. Like he's kind of a little guy, so he would just kind of be shadowing us, kind of walking around. And then periodically through training, he would like give us questionnaires, and he would have like little, you go to like Mary Callender's or somewhere, and like he'd like interview you, and like kind of he'd pull out like little vignettes about stuff that happened. But he was just there kind of in the shadows watching us, the silent observer.
What were you LPO?
I was not. Yeah, there was 2 other E5s there. So there's 4 E5s. And there was some E6s, but they all quit. So my roommate ended up being the LPO for most of training, John Owens. But yeah, I was like next in line, but he also made it all through training. So, I never had the chance to be the LPO.
So from some of the guys we talked to, some of them said Budge was beautiful. Budge was life-changing. And then some of them said Budge was the worst thing they've ever experienced in their life. We've had the full extreme where you fall.
I fall perfectly in the middle, because it's like, I will say like it was like the best 6 months of my life and the worst 6 months of my life, because it was like so transcendent. That's like the only way I can describe it, because it's like you are seeing the secrets of, I don't think I'm being like hyperbolic right now. Like you're seeing the secrets of reality. You're seeing how far a human can go, can be pushed. Like I just don't know. Like, and this could be bias, like speaking, right? I don't know if the other training programs do the same thing. Like maybe, you got the long walk that like SAS or Delta does. And maybe that, like, have you never experienced those things? I can't say for sure, right? But like doing Hell Week, like in that one intense 5.5 days, like you see, like everything falls away. And you're like what I thought was a limit is not a limit. It's like, that was just laughable. Like I thought that was a limit. That's not a limit. So you get to see behind like the veils of reality, and you get to like feel the intensity of connection with, your teammates, and you're just in it, and you can look each other in the eye, and you're like, I'm here for you. You're here for me. We're going to get through this together. And that's, I don't know, it's magical. And yeah, like you said, and then it's awful, right? I think somebody on your podcast was like, the instructor going through a divorce that like comes and is like, correct. I'm like, I could totally remember that. Like, like 8 o'clock on a Friday night, and like somebody leaves their room unlocked, and it's like the pain train is coming. So yes, there's that side of it. And it's like, that's not fair, but life isn't fair. Sorry, buddy. And so there's just joy and pain, and it's all rolled into one. And it's like, I don't know. So I think I'm just grateful that I got to do it. Like I feel just humbled that I got to do it.
Yeah. I mean, the intensity, it leaves a lot of like images in the brain. So if you had an image, what was the clearest, like maybe most powerful, most painful image you have in that first 3 weeks, including Hell Week? Is there one moment that was like, shit, this was it?
Yes. All right. So there's this moment that I try to describe it to people, and I don't know if I'm doing like that good job of describing it, but it's like a psychedelic moment. That's the only way I can describe it. And so it's like Monday afternoon of Hell Week. So we're moving around, and we're like, we got the boats on our heads, we're running. And this is like obviously I haven't even seen the new compound, but the old compound up, by the amphibious base. And we're like running with the boats on our heads, and there's these like beach markers that were there for like old, amphibious operations, right? And they're like, they're kind of like an H shape, but they're only like about 4 feet wide between the stanchions. And the instructors are like, down boat. And they're like, boat crew 2, get your boat through these stanchions. And we're like just going to town. Like we're trying to execute, and we're like trying to slam this boat through these stanchions. And it's clear like the boat is way too wide to get through these stanchions. And I like look up at the instructors like out of the corner of my eye as we're doing it. And there's like 2 of them just looking at each other like, look at these idiots, like look at these dummies trying to do this. And in that moment, it was like this, I dropped into like a state that I can only describe as psychedelic. And I was like, I'm going to make it through Hell Week. And I knew it. And I was like, they can murder me and I won't make it through, but short of murdering me, I will make it through Hell Week. And I think everybody goes through that moment. Some people it's like Tuesday night, some people it's Wednesday night. So I've always felt like very lucky that it like happened to me like Monday afternoon. And I was like, yeah, like I'm not afraid anymore. I felt just at peace because I was like, yeah, it's going to suck. Like, cool, but like I'm going to make it. And I was just grateful for that.
That's epic. So you just retired 27 years.
Yeah.
What was the exact 27?
It was like 27 and a half. Yeah.
That's so congratulations.
Oh, thank you.
That's epic. So
Thank you.
27 years. We're talking about Buzz you went through in 99.
Yeah, 99. And then, graduated April 2000.
April 2000,
Yeah.
which is obviously a year and a half before 9/11, which I guess we'll come to that. But let's talk about checking into the teams. Where'd you go? Thoughts? Anything?
Yeah. So back then, the teams were like geographically aligned. So we did this thing where we realigned them and kind of made them all standardized. But before then, I spoke some Spanish. I'm not like fluent, but I'm decent. So I'm like, okay, I'll go to SEAL Team 4. They do South America. Got orders to SEAL Team 4. We did, you do jump school on the way. So we had like a massive road trip of like the guys in my class. We, road tripped over to Fort Benning. We did like 3 weeks in Benning, just awful, just Army Airborne School, which was like, talk about like culture shock. You're going from, small team operations in third phase of Buds. And, there's like 20 guys in the class. And then you go to like jump school and there's like, 300 in the class. And then you're in the machine. So that was like a huge shock. But then, then we're on the road going back to Virginia Beach and then checking into SEAL Team 4. That was still kind of like stuck in the 90s type stuff, like OTBs, like very much like kind of that old Vietnam era stuff. We didn't have Navy Marine Corps parachutist wings yet because we hadn't done 10 jumps. We'd only done 5. So, but they made us sew on the like Army jump wings onto the camis before we got like our 5 jumps to like actually put on the Navy Marine Corps parachutes. So, stuff like that. And then this is back when you got to a team before you didn't have a trident, right? So you like now, like you kind of get it at the schoolhouse, but back then you had to like go to a team, they checked you out, and each team had their own individual like process for like evaluating the individuals and then giving them a trident. So got to a team, got into, back then it was called SEAL Tactical Training. So each coast ran their own SEAL Tactical Training and then got in that and then, did our trident boards after that.
Where were you when 9/11 happened?
So we were down in Stennis, Mississippi doing, it used to be called an ORE, an operational readiness exercise.
I think it's an FTX now, final training.
Okay. So yeah, it's all meaning the same thing. It's like your final check as a maneuver element before you go on deployment. So we're doing that in Stennis, Mississippi. We're living in CB tents that flooded every afternoon. There was like a rainstorm. It was like, they put these CB tents up on like a baseball field and we're living in them. We're doing like, CSAR, combat search and rescue at night, direct action missions, and then coming back and, trying to sleep through the day. We had just come back from, CSAR the night before. Everybody's trying to sleep and like somebody bursts into the tent and is like, hey, a plane just hit the, World Trade Center. So we all like run and there was like we had like a media, like communication van that was connected to a tent that like the communication guys had and ran in there and somebody had like a TV on in there. And then we watched the second one hit on TV. And then we're just like, wow, like, it's on now.
Did you guys know what that meant back then?
It was such a paradigm change. Like, and the only thing I know how to compare it to is like my parents talking about when JFK died. Like, it was like that level of like everybody's paradigm of the world shifted in that instance. And yeah, there were people that like warned that something like that could happen, but nobody was really like en masse, like prepared for it. And so, we felt like, hey, like we're here, we've been training hard, like we're ready to go. We're ready to fight. So it was like a validation kind of for all of us, kind of that path, like choosing that path.
So you were super young, found out 9/11 happened. Was there even like an inkling in your mind that it would look the way it did, the whole global war on terror did for 20 plus years?
Not immediately. I think it took a couple years for that to sink in. And that's when I was like, okay, I can go to college and like actually get, develop some actionable skills. So like after my 3rd platoon, I went to college and then majored in like Middle Eastern studies and took Arabic. But yeah, immediately you're like, we have no idea how long this is going to take. I think all the human biases like come in where you're like, oh yeah, this will take, 5 minutes, or this will take a year, but you don't really kind of see, you're just so like focused, front side focused. But yeah, over time, I think people realize, okay, this is going to take a long time.
So let's talk about first couple of platoons. You said 3 platoons, then college. Is that when let's go through the platoons real quick and then college.
Yeah. So first platoon, we ended up doing a Southcom deployment. So went down like Colombia. We're based in Puerto Rico, and then did a couple other countries there. Came back. Obviously we're like very disappointed because that deployment was after 9/11. So we, everybody wanted to get in the fight then, but didn't happen. Second platoon came back. We shifted with the reorganization. We shifted to SEAL Team 2, and then deployed there to Iraq. We were up in Mosul doing direct action, and then we shifted down to Baghdad to stand up the protective detail down there.
Ooh, how was Mosul?
I'd say we're kind of like a SWAT team, for the city. And it was just like, manhunting was just kind of like, we were starting to figure it out back then. This is like 2004. We're starting to be like, how do we manhunt effectively? How do we start to like integrate all these various intelligences into like a system that will like get us after like individual X, and then like, once we capture that guy, like turn him, figure out who else is in the network. It's like all that stuff was just coming online, at least up there.
What was like a standard mission like? Was it straight up DA? Can you walk through it?
Yeah, so it's just, we had the Grob up there, which was amazing, like the Polish Grob. And they were like, those dudes were just characters. But yeah, we would just basically get, intel, I think just like the standard deployment, you're kind of the vampire hours, right? Like your days are inverted. So, you wake up late afternoon, you're like seeing what's going on, seeing what targets maybe, have good intelligence on them, and then gear prep. And then if things are moving towards, fruition, okay, hey, we're going to, outboard this time. I don't even think we called it an outboard in 2004. It was probably still like a PLO at that point, like patrol leader's order. Like we hadn't like standardized our like terminology at that point. But yeah, so then, we'd brief, do some hasty rehearsals. Most of our stuff was like ground, like Humvees, unarmored Humvees back then. And then
I can't even imagine that.
Yeah. And then
a lot of lessons learned of those.
Well, because but this was before like IEDs started, like this deployment was like right when like IEDs were becoming a big enough threat that was like, okay, we got to go armored. But our mindset was like, these things are like fast and agile. We can just jump in and out of them quick. So kind of speed is our security, that kind of attitude. But yeah, it'd be somewhere in the city and you'd roll out, you have guys on vehicles, guys to do isolation containment, and then the assault force. So you just kind of figure out the neighborhood and figure out how you're going to approach it, and then go in there and assault it. And then, based on that, the tactical questioning, do you need to like, are there any like follow-ons you got to go to or, flexing to, and then head home, and then, rejock and get ready to do it the next night.
So South America, Iraq, what was your third deployment?
Yeah. So third deployment went to Afghanistan, like right after Red Wings. So went up in Bagram, and it was still like early, Bagram, still wasn't like, I ended up going back to Bagram like later in my career, and like it, it was like just the monstrosity of like, it looked like a CONUS base. But
Pizza Hut and everything.
Yeah, I mean, it's like the buildings, all to like US code, it's like, it's ridiculous. But back then it was just like the plywood huts type thing. So up in Bagram, and I ended up like only being there for 3 months because I got picked up for Seaman Admiral, but didn't really get to do too much on that deployment. Like we went down and worked with the Canadian SOF down in Kandahar, but really only did like probably 3 or 4 operations like on that in those 3 months. But definitely got to kind of see the environment.
So Seaman Admiral, that's enlisted to officer. The whole time, did you want to become an officer? How did that come about?
So when I was on my ship, I thought about it. Like I had a division officer that was like really encouraging me to do it. The division officer is like your leader of like your group on the ship, like your kind of mid-level manager leader. But he was encouraging me to go to the Naval Academy.
After 3 deployments, go to the Naval Academy?
No. So he was This is back when I was still like, 20 on the
Right.
ship. He was like trying to get me to go to the Naval Academy, and I thought about it, but I realized, it's probably gonna be a lot harder to go to buds as like an officer than as an enlisted guy, which is, totally still true today. So I figured like I should, definitely become a SEAL first. And then if I still was interested, I can kind of go down that route. My pathway in the enlisted side was like communications, JTAC, and then sniper. And so like, obviously, as like communications, JTAC, that kind of flows into like the officer role, because you're like, I view like the officer, the JTAC, and the comm guy as like, they're just like one big, mind that are like sharing information on an operation. So that was just kind of a natural segue from those two roles up to, ground force commander. I just looked at it, where can I best contribute to this team? And I think, I'm like, I think I have something to offer as an officer, so I can go do that.
All right. So after that, you go back to the teams. How many more deployments? However you want to sum up 27.
Oh, yeah. So then I do an AOIC back at Team 4, go back to Iraq. Then I go to support activity 2, which is now SRT 2, kind of like our intel focused teams. And then selection training, maritime mobility troop commander. I was in charge of a troop of SWICs. That was a great tour. Then I went to Naval Postgraduate School, got my master's from Naval Postgraduate School. I went to Team 8, did a platoon commander there. I went to Europe, and then back to Damneck, did a tour there. And then I managed to secure a tour as a ROTC professor for the last part of my career. So then I got to come teach midshipmen and kind of help them get ready for the fleet, and then retired out of there.
So let's dig into the difference between enlisted and officer. So like, let's just, before we did, like, best and worst aspect of being enlisted.
Yeah.
And then we'll do the same thing, officer, and then we'll compare the two.
Best parts about being enlisted, I think you get to deeply specialize in a craft, whatever it is. If you're jumping, you're a sniper, you're a breacher, you get to just drill into that craft for years and just achieve mastery of it. And there's something beautiful in that pursuit. And then just the camaraderie of like being like your enlisted bro, like that is like something that's amazing. Like I think just like there's a tightness when you're enlisted. I think that's awesome. Worst parts about being enlisted, I would say probably dudes will literally just like work themselves to death, because culturally they're like, nah, man, I'm here. This is why I'm here, to go to war. I want to train. I want to work on Saturdays. I want to like go on road trips. And then they will do that to the detriment of like their family and then to themselves. And they will literally like work themselves to death, or to burnout, I should say, unless somebody's there to kind of, take care of them and be like, hey bro, are you sure? Like, why don't you stay back on this trip and like, watch your kid play soccer? There's also like a cultural expectation, I think, amongst enlisted guys of like, don't take a knee, work hard, work hard, work hard. There is something like noble to that. It's like the pursuit of perfection and like execution on the battlefield. There is something like very like worthy about that, but it needs to be stewarded by like the wisdom to like, okay, you can, you got to go off deployment to like see the birth of your kid. That's going to force you to do that, because like you're going to regret that in 15 years. Like there's that element. So that would be probably the best and worst of like the enlisted side. The officer side, well, the best part for me, I would say, is like you get to like take care of dudes. Like you get to like care for them and like care for their career. Cause like, there's so much administrative BS in the military, like, fit reps, evals, awards, sailor of the quarter. And like, your average frogman, like they're not into that. You know what I mean? Like they're not into doing paperwork, but like you can do that for them and like get them the evals that they need, get them the awards they need, get them recognized for the job they do, and just help them on their career. That's what I had the most satisfaction about, is like taking care of dudes. And then you get to, and that's another, I think that's another thing that frustrates guys when they're senior enlisted, is like, they've seen all the problems that they're like, hey, I know how to fix this. But as a senior enlisted guy, like your span of like ability to like change policy is limited. So I see them like when they get to like E8 and E9, I see a lot of my friends were like frustrated because they're like, I know how to fix this problem, but I don't have the like, the power, the, organizational power like in this group to change it. But as an officer, like when you become an 05, like 06, you do have that power. Like you can make changes. So hopefully, the 05s, 06s, they're listening to people and like making wise changes. The worst part about being an officer, yeah, probably the connection. Like I didn't feel as connected with guys like when I was in O. Like, I mean, I had like, you develop close friendships. Like, when you're in the arena together, like the troop commander and the troop chief, like you'll make strong connections there, or like your fellow, troop commanders, platoon commanders. But I didn't get to feel as connected. Being an officer, you got to be like such a generalist, and then you're like moving every couple years from position. So yeah, I guess that would be like the worst part is the connection.
Can you compare the brain between an enlisted guy and an officer, at least in the SEAL teams, and in your own opinion? Is one more artistic, one more linear, one more intuitive? Like, how do you actually think about the different operation of the brain, given the demands of the job, and maybe even the personalities drawn to either being enlisted or officer?
Yeah. So I fucking love like frogmen because they're so artistic.
Yep.
And I've always been just so like, I'm like, man, I'm so lucky to be in this community because it's like the dudes are just so artistic. And even like clearing a building is such an artistic act. It's such a beautiful like choreography of people. So Jamie Wheel, he talks about this and he's got Recapture the Rapture and Stealing Fire. He talked to SEALs and kind of he gets into this a little bit, like in Stealing Fire, kind of the mind that is created by the mass of men together. They become this like super organism together. And I tried to like articulate this to like one of my platoons, and they're like, what they took away was like, I was saying that they needed to be a porcupine moving through space. Cause I was trying to describe like, you're just facing outward, like 360, 720 degrees. And you're just like this over, like the platoon commanders, like the higher brain functions. You got recce, you got the long guns, you got the heavy guns, you got the breachers. They're all like contributing to this massive creature that's moving through space together. And you're communicating over comms, you're pushing situational awareness. So that is an amazing thing that is not related at all to the question you asked. So which minds are more artistic?
Not even that, just intuition. What's the difference between the enlisted brain and the officer brain?
I mean, first of all, like guys in our community are like way, they're more educated than like the normal like military person, right? So like most enlisted guys I knew like had a bachelor's, so like some of them had like masters, some of them are like ridiculous, brains. There's just more enlisted guys that are craftier, more pragmatic, just more intuitive, when they're planning, they're, how do we get in here? How do we do this? How do we get in without them detecting us? All those things, the like enlisted guy that's like been around, he's achieved like this mastery and kind of can put things together just in a very unique and creative way. And then you'll see it like manifest and like, the guys are like, playing guitars, they're doing this, they're doing that. They're building stuff. That art, the artistic side comes out in different ways. But I like to try to frame it like, you've got the art, you've got the science, and then you got like craftsmanship in the middle. And so their craftsmanship is just, it's just great to like watch in action. I think I've always like enjoyed watching like senior enlisted guys like that really know their stuff, like just get to work and like and think innovatively. And then the officer side, like there's creativity involved, but like you're in the machine, like you're trying to like get work for the men. So it's like you got to like know all these just arcane administrative processes. You got to schmooze, the higher leadership that you're going to go work for. Work the con ops approvals, all that stuff requires like the linear thinking. There's definitely still creativity on the officer side to get, especially like when you're like trying to find gainful employment for your boys, like you got to be like making stuff happen. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah. What about Best leadership advice you could possibly give. I looked up your thesis. It seems like preparing to be unprepared is a major theme, but
Yeah.
what would your best leadership advice be to anybody?
I mean, I default to, humility, I think. And like, I hope people don't hear humility and think like being passive or being timid. I hope people take away like, like you don't think less of yourself, you think of yourself less. So there's so much that even like at the end of my career, I'm like, I have no idea about this. The individual mind has such limits to its ability to understand situations. So being humble enough to understand like when I have a wrong perception and I need to listen to the people around me, I would say like be humble and like kind of take in other perspectives.
Do you think maybe coming from the enlisted background made that a bit easier for you?
Without a doubt. I mean, I think that was helpful, but I know plenty of officers that are able to do that well. Cause I think you get, it's like jujitsu, like, you either be humble or you get humbled over time. So like the ones that weren't humble and like, oh, well, I know what to do here. And like kind of go it on their own. They get humbled over time and they're like, oh, wait a minute. Okay. I need to, seek counsel for this.
What about best followership advice you could possibly give? I just admire your background because again, you were E1 to where you ended up 27 years later. What did you do well to work your way up that way as a follower that people can take away?
Yeah. I mean, I think I just tried to execute everything I was tasked with to like the max of my abilities. So like, I almost tried to like take like a samurai, type approach. Like I remember being on a ship and this was like before I went to Buds. And, I mean, the heads on a ship are just, they're not the best. They're kind of nasty, right? Let me explain. The heads are the bathroom on the ship, right? So they would develop like 3 or 4 inches of water on the deck and it would just swirl around your underwear and it's just gross. And like, so I was like E1, E2, you have to clean the bathrooms. And then, the other thing is like, sometimes there'd be no like hot water. And I remember like, there's a kid in my division that like wanted to be a SEAL, but he like wouldn't shave when there wasn't hot water. And I was just like, why would you like, you want to be a SEAL and like, you can't shave with cold water? Like, what are you thinking you're getting into? But I remember from a young age, like even like being like 19 and being like, and I actually thought about like the dropping bombs, like analogy. I was like, how can I be trusted to like talk to an aircraft and drop bombs if I can't like clean this bathroom like effectively? And so I would say like that would be like my one tip is like execute every task to the, utmost of your ability, no matter how like, mundane or unpleasant. Like, yeah, like in boot camp, I was like that with the bathroom at boot camp. Like it was like, I just took the dirtiest jobs and I tried to do my best.
I dig it. What's probably, before we wrap up the military section, do you have a best mission?
I got to go into Ukraine in 2018. Yeah, 2018. And help out, like kind of developing their maritime stuff. I feel like that was a very unique chance to go do something very concrete. The training cell that we were able to set up there, I think it has definitely paid dividends in the conflict right now.
Are you still in touch with those guys?
One of them unfortunately passed away
as a result of the conflict.
Yeah. But that was probably the main guy that I was in comms with. But yeah, they've had some great successes down there, and I like to think we had some small part in that. But who knows? We got to go into Ukraine multiple times and kind of see the country, see the people, culture, and then kind of contribute concretely to that struggle.
I didn't ask you in the beginning. I asked you like why you wanted to be a SEAL. We talked about Navy SEALs and Charlie Sheen.
Yeah.
But like looking back after 27 years, wrapping it up, what was it like? Why did you want to be a SEAL? And then 27 years later, did it scratch the itch?
Oh yeah.
Was it what you thought it was going to be?
Yeah. So I think so. I had a ridiculous imagination when I was a kid. I was reading like just lots of like pulp, like men's fiction. So there's this like guy, Mac Bolan, who was kind of like the Punisher. And then there was like this group, Phoenix Force. One of the guys in the group was a SEAL. I like saw that world and I'm like, I think I can do that. I think I have the capability to do that. And then my thought process, this is like, I don't know, this is like age 13, 14 me. I was like, well, I have the capability to do it. I should do it, because if I don't do it, then I'm like wasting what I've been given as a human. And if I do it, if I try and I fall short, it's like, all right, cool, man, you tried. But so that was kind of why I wanted to do it. And I was always like kind of called to serve the country. I think that was like the biggest thing is like that, the Taylor Swift quote of, people sleep safely in their beds at night because rough men stand ready to do violence on their behalf. I think it was Taylor Swift that said that.
I think you're right.
But I always want to be like one of those rough men. I'm like, that seems like, you're just kind of a guardian. You're kind of a steward. So I was attracted to doing that service. And then I think, I definitely stayed in as long as I did just because of the caliber of the people that you get to serve with, like that's like, you're just like with these amazing humans. And like, this will like segue into the fiction writing section, but like, you're just with these humans that like, if I tried to write some of the people that we have served with, it's like people would be like, that is
People think you're lying.
That person's like too ridiculous. Yep. And you're like, no, that's actually like a real, like there are real people that are this ridiculous in a way of like, I cannot believe like how amazing you are as a human, that kind of way. But yeah, so I stayed in as long as I did just because of the caliber of the people. So, I feel very grateful that I was able to do that. I don't know how else to feel except just gratitude that I got to have the career I did.
Rock on. So segueing into writing, we'll talk about reading first. So we're in your room right here. From the floor to the ceiling is stacked inch to inch with books.
Yeah.
No rhyme or reason. Every subject,
Yeah.
every era. It's pretty strong. So I guess one question I've always wondered about, how do you best like internalize all the little bits of wisdom or information you want from all these different books?
Yeah.
Is there a proprietary method you have that you've learned through a lifetime of reading?
The general answer is I think a lot of it is just getting subconsciously internalized. So I'm not a cognitive scientist, but that's a great caveat, right? But I think there's a lot of like stuff in our brains that are happening below the conscious level. So a lot of the stuff like I'll read and I'll just forget. And there's probably a way to optimize that. But when I do try to capture stuff more mindfully, I underline, I write, I engage in the margins of the text as a way to kind of like have a conversation with the writer. And then I'll try to connect to other things. So obviously like the book, How to Read a Book is an amazing book to read. That kind of teaches you how to, different levels of reading. You can kind of really skim it and kind of just read the table of contents. A lot of like pop science books really should just be like a long article. They shouldn't be, full length book, but publishers kind of want a book to be a certain length. So they have to kind of like buff it out with a bunch of fluff. So like if you're reading like a popular science book, you can probably just, get the high points from, the intro, conclusion, and read some of the main chapter headings. But besides that, like books that I've really tried to engage with, I'll underline, I'll go through. I've seen like, I think Shane Parrish of Farnham Street, like he advocates like, as soon as you finish a book, go to the front and like jot down like, 5 things you took away from it. I haven't incorporated that technique yet, but I think that's a very valuable one. Obviously, if you're on Kindle, you can highlight, export all that stuff to a document. I don't like reading on Kindle. I mean, I think it's great. Like people do that. I think it's a great way to have a lot of books, but I just like that I'm more of like an analog guy. And obviously I'm ready for the zombie apocalypse. I'm trying to prepare, a collection of knowledge to preserve for future generations after the descent into savagery. After I underline, then I'll usually I'll kind of type out a document that I'm trying to summarize the main points. And some of them I've been like putting out on my Substack, summaries I've done. And that's kind of the best way. And then the other thing, I'm big on like commonplace notebooks. So what I love to do is like fill out a notebook full of just random stuff, tidbits that you collect. So I've got like, I'll show you the notebooks after this, man. Like they're just ridiculous. And then there's like a weird scrapbooking fetish, I think from my mom, where like I'll print, print out like graphics and like images and like paste them in there. And it gets like real weird, but it's just me trying to like externalize my brain a little bit into notebooks. And then you can kind of periodically reread them and kind of, that will like kind of access the larger body that's kind of waiting there below the surface. But that's just a way to like try to, connect everything like synthetically connect different domains, and then I use the Notes app. Like I'd experiment with Evernote, but I got hacked once and I just did not like that feeling
No shit.
that somebody else had like access to it for a couple hours. So I'm like, I'm done. So I just use Apple Notes, and like I have like, probably 2,000 or 3,000 notes of just random things. And then I can kind of keyword search that. I think I'm just, when I grew up, when and where I grew up, I'm just an analog guy. So I like, I like to write it down. I like to highlight physical books. And that's kind of the method that I think works. And there's some cognitive science research that says that that's a better way to do it, writing things out longhand versus typing them. But, who knows? I think the bottom line is like people will figure out what works for them, and hopefully it'll go. Yeah.
Okay. And then you're obviously a writer. We'll dig into that. But I wondered, do you see a difference between reading as a reader and reading as a writer? Was there a pivot at which you're like, all right, this is interesting, I'm consuming information, but now you're looking at a book as, that was an interesting way to think about it, how to phrase a sentence, how to articulate a point. Do you see a differential there? When you read, do you think about writing?
Yes, without a doubt. So when you're just a reader, because I've been writing since I was 10, but like really writing seriously probably the last like 5 years, to where I'm like devoted to it like every day. And I think so when you're just a consumer, you just kind of like unconsciously know that you like something or you don't like something, and you don't really stop to think why. And maybe like something will bother you about something you read, but you don't quite know why, or you get bored and you stop reading, but you don't like stop to figure out why something bores you, or you didn't like something. So that now on the writer side, I'm actually like digging into that deeply and figuring out like the nuts and bolts of why do people think that's boring? Why do they think it's not compelling? Like you go back through like your favorite books and like be like, why do I like this so much? Like, what is it about the sentence construction, the conflict, the tension? Like, what is it that's attracting me to this work?
Do you feel like you get to know a writer to a certain point the more you read their works? Like you're writing a novel. It's almost impossible to write a novel without someone reading it and then knowing something about your soul, because you're recreating the world, your own characters, your own dialogue, your own philosophy. Do you get that impression when you're reading something? You're like, wow, I understand this author, not just the author's point.
I think it's important, like as a writer, I should like put this like public service announcement that like whatever, just because an author has a character that says something, it doesn't mean that the writer agrees with that. And I think that a lot of people are like, well, they had a character that said this, so they think that. And it's like, no, that, they're just using the characters as a foil to talk about something in reality. So, but yes, to your point, like, yes, you get to know somebody's mind in the course of reading their, whether it's fiction or nonfiction. I got a teenage daughter, and, she used to be a big reader. Now she's not really a big reader. And I'm trying to help her understand that like reading like allows you a depth of understanding that's not available through the video, the visual medium. So like, it's great. We can have TikToks, we can have YouTube, we can learn stuff. And yes, in like, like a 3-hour video, like you can get like pretty in depth in something, right? What a novel gives you is like, access to other characters' mental states, their interiority. And you can't even really do that in a movie unless you like have like the voiceover with like their thoughts. You can't get to it as well as a novel. So what I try to explain to her is like, a novel or, short story gives you interiority. It gives you like access to other ways of like seeing reality. And that just helps you because like you just have one way of seeing reality, but like reading those other works adds to your like cognitive toolbox. So you can be going through life and you're like, wait a minute. Oh, this looks like situation Y that this other character went through. And really like moving forward, like reading deeply is going to be a competitive advantage for humans as we begin our slow descent into idiocracy. And we start putting Gatorade on crops. Reading deeply is going to help us understand and engage with the complexities of the world.
So going back, we just said since you were a kid, you were writing. I didn't realize you started that young. When did you first started writing?
Yeah. So the first story, so my aunt typed out a story that I wrote when I was 10. So I don't know if I wrote it when I was like 9 and she typed it out when I was 10 or if I wrote it, but I like distinctly remember my grandparents were watching my sister and they had another couple over at their house. And then I remember explaining to like the woman about this story idea I had, and like helicopters were coming down to like pick people up. And I remember like looking into her eyes and like her eyes like widened because she was like, who are you? And like, why are you talking about helicopters landing and like the turnaround of the street? And I remember like kind of like I made the like leap of like, wow, this is like weird that I'm not, 9 and I'm like telling her this story because I could kind of see it through her eyes. But yeah, so I've been doing that since then.
What is like ultimately your goal with writing? It's not just a hobby. It's not just a vague interest. You've been doing it since you were 10. You're doing it with a super intensity. What is the overarching goal?
I think I've always just been drawn to tell stories. Yeah, I think initially I wanted to be like, I just want to tell like Die Hard. Like I want to write like action. That's what I wanted to do. Really wasn't like into like literary fiction when I was a kid. So I wasn't like, I didn't understand that you can actually like help people live better lives through writing fiction. So now I think that's definitely like, when I'm writing fiction, I'm looking to kind of like help people make sense of reality and then like, chart a better course through reality. And then with the nonfiction, like I've just been like very like surprised that I'm writing nonfiction at all because I wasn't like expecting it. I was like, why am I writing like nonfiction essays? As you know, like writing is a way to like externalize your thinking and sharpen your thoughts, sharpen your ideas about the world. So that's a big part of it is like I'm writing out stuff to learn it, to process it, and then hopefully someone else is getting like utility from it as well.
It's something that struck me was the difference between writing as a writer and writing as a thinker. And there are, I think, two substantial differences there. I think some people look at writing and they treat writing as how beautifully can I write, as opposed to can I genuinely offer something unique, a different perspective and originality, get into your head.
Yeah.
Which I think you're trying to do in your novel from the little bit you've let me read. So like, do you ever think about that? Has it ever come across your mind?
Writing just to be like flowery. I think probably because that writing is like never really attracted me. Like writing that's just designed to be, I don't know, like very beautiful in itself. And that's,
I see it infecting me. That's why I ask. Because sometimes I'm like, I get so obsessed about, can I make the sentence attractive? I almost forget the overarching point. It's very knuckle draggery. I didn't know if it ever hit you.
Yeah, I'm trying to like get better by writing simpler. My earlier writing, like I definitely write like in kind of like this pretentious, like overwriting style. And so I think I'm trying to get like to simplify my writing, both fiction and nonfiction.
So fiction's a unique beast. And I'm curious, how did you learn certain skills of like using the right person?
Mm-hmm.
Which there's like, you could write books on the use of the right person, first, second, third.
Yeah.
The omnipotent narrator or different types of narrators, crafting, even just crafting a plot. Like there are books written on how to do that kind of thing.
I'm definitely like, I'm a journeyman on the process of becoming a good writer, right? And so what I see right now in the market from my, limited newbie perspective is just third person limited, which is like you're just in a POV for a chapter and then you can like jump to, a chapter, a scene, and then jump to a different POV for later ones, or first person, right? So you're like directly in the head. Because I think people today really want that interiority. I think they're like hungry for that interiority. And I think that like sucks you in better than like omnipotent. So that's where I'm kind of focusing my efforts on right now. And until now, I've just done third limited. And I think I'll probably shift to some first because I think people like first as well. It depends on like, what your goal is with the story. So if you're like, I want to talk about forgiveness, or, I want to talk about, the power of, or, the dangers of bad decisions. You want to start with like a thread of like, what is the thing I want to talk about? And then from there, you can like germinate a character that can best denote that, right? That will suggest the, the delivery mechanism in the form of the character.
How do you actually articulate the scenery from the first person point of view?
Yeah. So, and again, like I am no expert. I'm just like a newbie. So there's a million ways to do it. But I think what I try to do is, I've like developed a lot of like, I think just probably being in the military, it's like an interesting being military and then being a writer. Like you bring the like discipline of the military into the writing. So like I've developed all these like, PowerPoints and like Excel spreadsheets of like, how do you develop a character and then kind of overlay that over like their perception. So, and I really like using the Enneagram, which is like this, like,
What is
woo.
that?
Enneagram is like this woo personality thing that basically has like these 9 different personality types. And I will use that for like a baseline. And then,
Almost like from Jungian psychology.
yeah, there's definitely like Jungian flavors in it, but like basically it'll just kind of like give you like these different archetypes of characters that temperaments basically. So like, what is your temperament? Is your temperament to like nurture and protect? Is it to go out there and be ambitious? Is it to be like a loyal friend? Like there's different tendencies and inclinations, I would say, in these Enneagram. So you can, and this example is, you can use that. You can use like 5-factor psychological personality, right? Like the ocean model, like openness to experience, conscientiousness, agreeableness, neuroticism, extroversion, introversion. You can use that too, right? So you make a character and then you obviously like create the backstory. And then I think how deep you go depends on how important the character is, right? So if it's your main character, you're going to be writing pages and pages. You're going to know their birthday. You're going to know like traumatic events from their childhood. You're going to know, what happened in 3rd grade, in gym class. If it's just like a side character, you're not going to devote as much to it. But, are they like cynical? Are they optimistic? Are they, temperamental? Like, are they on a diet and they're just angry? So you'll kind of like think of all these different tendencies, and then those tendencies will be almost like colored glasses that the character's wearing. So they're looking at the world through the prism of those characteristics. So, one person may look at somebody mowing a lawn and be like, that's so nice. I love that sound. It reminds me of summer, and I love the smell of cut grass. It's so great. And then another person will say, God, this thing is so noisy and it's just like ruining my life right now. And this guy's an idiot. So like those characteristics will kind of color what you're taking into the world. So the cognitive scientist Jonathan Vervaeke talks about relevance realization. And what that is like what salient details you're taking in about the world to make sense of the world, right? So you and I some things we key on are going to be similar and some things are going to be different. But each character is like that. And so the trick is like finding the characteristics of that character and then showing the sensory details from that, maybe they're trying to quit smoking and they're like craving a cigarette and that's making them cranky. So you kind of like put that flavor into how they're describing the world. And then obviously then you have like the, unreliable narrator, like, Gone Girl, those type of stories where like the character's not portraying reality to the reader effectively. And then like once you figure that out, you're like, okay, wait, now I need to like take everything that I'm reading with a grain of salt. It's not maybe totally how it's being portrayed.
Are you sort of developing a writer's brain at this point where every interaction you have, every time you set foot outside the house, go to the grocery store, have a conversation, are you cataloging experiences and sounds and conversations and ideas? Is it changing the way you look at the world?
Oh, I mean, it definitely does, because you have to bring in you have to have a Rolodex of like stuff and like kind of seeing how, because like if it's just me, then it's like I'm bound by like, books I've read or like movies I've seen. And that gets like very cliched very quickly, right? Because everybody will just write like these tropes. So yeah, like paying attention when you're out in life for like turns of phrase, like the way that people talk. And then you can kind of bring that back into your individual work. Yeah.
So the Rolodex is interesting. So you're not only trying to accumulate real world experiences to integrate into your books, you also have, we just talked about 27 years worth of military experience overseas, different countries, different missions, different statuses, different roles. How much, I guess, if you could lay a percentage on it, how much do you recall from your past versus what you're observing in the modern day?
Yeah. So, and what's interesting is like when you read all this advice from writers, right? Like they all start to collapse around certain like very common things. And like, one of them is obviously like, just go out in life and get experience. So like, yeah, you can start being a writer at age 20, but it helps to kind of have a lot of life experience. So, and that's one thing that the military gives you in spades. And obviously like, you don't need the military to like, there's plenty of people that get lots of life experiences from other ways, but like, the benefit of the military is like you get to travel the world. So you're seeing like all these different cultures and the different ways of being. you're seeing like crazy situations, you're seeing crazy people, and all that can kind of go in there and inform your, your creative brain. Because I think like life is so dynamic. So if you want to write certain timeless themes you can write about, but like if you're trying to keep up with the times, like it's like, I got to pay attention to my daughter. I got to be like interrogating her like Sears School style to like figure out how she thinks, right? Like Gen Z, like how does a Gen Z see the world, which is totally different than me. Like I'm a cusp, but like I'm an ex millennial cusp. Like I see the world totally differently than a Gen Z person. So like I need to like understand how they're looking at the world because that will inform, everything.
You're crushing fiction. You're hitting the personal essay thing. You do a lot of book reviews, which I super dig because you're summarizing these books down to the core essence. You've done your thesis. You're doing another thesis. Like if you gave advice to writers, which obviously you're saying you're a newbie, which you're being modest. Do you recommend people experiment with everything? Does it make them better? Should you be a specialist? What are your thoughts on that?
I had a writing teacher that used to always say, like, he was quoting somebody else, and I think it might have been Taylor Swift, when he said nobody knows anything. And I think what he meant by that was what works for somebody may not work for somebody else. So like, I think I'm very hesitant to like say, do X, Y, and Z, but certain things, like certain people may be more like, diary style entries, travel log. Certain people may be, fiction, essays. So it's, I think like dabble with it all, but I've always like, even like writing my master's thesis, I was like, this is still writing, I'm like, it's like, with jujitsu and like, if you take like a wrestler, right? And then he goes into jujitsu, like he's got the mat hours, he's got like the mat hours on the, so all he's got to do is really like memorize the moves. And he already has that like intuitive awareness of the body. So I think the same thing with writing. I'm like, even if I'm writing nonfiction, that's like contributing to my fiction because I'm getting like the reps and the mat hours.
Rock and roll. Dude, what's your soul type? Is that fiction?
I don't know, like I thought it was, but it's like, I don't know. Like, I think I've got to be like humble enough to be like, yeah, like, I don't know, man, you're just going to turn into like whatever you're going to turn into. So like, I want to write fiction. I've got, the first novel's done, trying to sell it. And then the second novel, The Heavenly Tunnel is coming along. And then obviously like all the short stories I've been writing have just been really helping get the reps in. But yeah, like the nonfiction, like who knows? Like I could be writing nonfiction. Like I don't know yet. So
random one, but like I read a great Orwell quote. He said something to the effect of all writing is political in nature. Do you think that is a thing?
I think there's a difference in writing with like a political motive in mind and then just writing to kind of like try to reveal reality in all of its like blemishes and imperfections. And I think both can be political. I think if you go overtly political, it's like Scratch and Poison Ivy. It's like, oh, this feels so good, man. Oh, let's freaking own the libs. Let's do this. Let's crush, these conservatives. Like it's like, it feels great, and there's an audience for it, right? So you can be captured by an audience, but it's just not like, I don't know how helpful that is, or if you're just like screaming into the void. So I would rather be like, I'm going to try to be honest with like, yeah, man, there's no like easy solutions here. There's like problems with both parts of whatever it is. So try to illustrate it as like complex as you can, I would say is the way to go.
It seems like some of the writers that are some of the most intense and prolific, they have like a strong write, revise, rewrite process, and they do it obsessively, night and day for years.
Yeah.
Do you fall into that camp?
So when I, like I said, with this novel, like I first wrote it in 2011 and it was a novella. It was about 30,000 words. And I totally scrapped that and did what's called a page one rewrite, which is like, you totally start from scratch, rewrote it with all new characters in like 2020-ish to 2022. And then sent that through developmental editors. And then, I was reading one of these books was like, rewrite, don't revise. And I was like, that freaking hurts.
Yeah.
Cause it's like, and they're like, it's okay to like have it up on the screen, but you're typing like new sentences from scratch. I'm like, oh, wow. That like, I know that is the right thing to do, but that sounds so painful. So after the pair of developmental editors, I would say I did like 75% rewrite and like 25% revise for that draft. And it made it like just so much better doing it that way. And it's like weird. It's like like the first draft, like the zero draft is like you're telling yourself the story. And then, and I even had to have like one of the editors was like, I think this is about trust. And I'm like, okay. Yeah. I'm like, yeah, I guess it is. And it's like, but I like I did not set out to write like about trust. And it was like reflected back to me. Right. So, and then like once that happened, then I can kind of be like, okay, I can be more mindful about, salting that in later drafts. So like the first draft is like, it carves a little channel. And then as you write the successive drafts, that channel is getting deeper and deeper and deeper, and you're honing in on the signal and you're separating the signal from the noise. So yeah, so revising is, to me, it's like that is where the magic is like the rewriting, the revising. It's just getting so much stronger. And like, getting critiques from the writing groups is just so helpful because you're figuring out like how it's landing with people.
What about like getting your brain in the zone for writing? So I look at it two different ways. Like what are one or two or three things you do to prime your brain for writing? And then when you're actually writing, is there music, location, certain ways you stay in a flow state?
Yeah.
So how do you think about that?
Yeah. So, so this is like another, like, nobody knows anything question. Like, so I think everybody's got their niche. It's going to be different for everybody, I would say. Right. And people have different situations, right? Like, so I'm married, I have 3 kids. Like I've got to work around, the hand I've been given. Right. So that means like a lot of times it's like get up at 4:30 and then like, you can write for a couple hours before the kids get up. I don't really like staying up late anymore just because I'm like old. And I like to I'd much rather like, go to bed early and get up early than like stay up late. But other people obviously like have different views on that. Like actually one of these books is like great routines of like famous artists. And I've got like a chart, like a graphic somewhere that's got an analysis of, famous, this guy or girl did an analysis of like famous artists and was like, when did they got up? When did they exercise? When did they sleep, party? When did they do their work? And invariably it's like either early morning or late night, is when the creative work is getting done. So whatever works for you, I would say do that. For me, I need to give myself a deadline. In terms of music, yeah, I think music would be distracting when I'm actually writing, but when I'm like ideating, music is amazing. So, yeah, like a lot of times, like I'll go out and like walk, listen to music, like walk out in the woods, listen to music, have a couple drinks, your altered state inducer of choice, I would say, if you're trying to get creative, and then you can ideate there. But then when you're like executing, music usually just kind of distracts me, but silence is probably like the best thing for that. In terms of like, yeah, what primes me, I dig into like, I'm a heavy, like, create like dossiers and like outlines and plans. So kind of dig into the source documents to help, understand the story deeper.
I can't write in the morning because I have nothing in my brain. It's almost like it's just empty. So I just train right when I wake up. Do you have to get the wheels spinning, or like do you wake up prime, just let's fucking go, and you start putting words on paper?
In terms of fiction writing, like what helps me is just having an outline and then, kind of putting yourself on a deadline. And I've been amazed, like, because, when you're talking about fiction, there's like, plotters and pantsers. So definitely like, so a plotter would be somebody that, and then Brandon Sanderson, the fantasy writer, he calls it world builder's disease, which is like, you spend so much time building the world and you're like not actually writing. So plotting heavily is like, you're just making a heavy outline. Like some people write like a 30-page outline of their novel, or longer, that says, every scene. And then some people are pantsers, or like, more like kind of gardening, I guess. And they're just like, well, we're just going to see what happens. Okay. The character walked down the street and then there was a bar in the alley and he went in the bar and he met this person, and they're just kind of like flowing and sending it. And both of those approaches have pros and cons. Most writers are somewhere in the middle, and the pantsers generally have to do like more heavy revision on the backside. Whereas like the plotters can kind of get, they can do like less drafts. I think typically that's how it ends up. Most people are like plantsers, kind of like a mix of plotter and pantser. So for me, what I've just found in my place in the writer journey is like, it's almost like a scene in a movie. If you can like block out the scene where like, okay, the character's standing here, this character's standing here, like she wants X, he wants Y, go. And like, you've kind of already like, if you can like create like a paragraph that like salts in all the conflict, you can just freaking roll and you can like knock a couple thousand words out quickly. Whereas if you're just kind of discovery writing, like you can kind of just get stuck. But if you know, like, okay, here's where they're starting the scene. He wants a cup of water. She doesn't want to give it to him. And then like at the end of the scene, this is where they end up. Then you can like, that just helps you create so much faster.
I take it.
Yeah.
You want to talk about the novel? Or you want to keep that one?
I don't do like Twitter at all. Like I have a Twitter account, but I don't like tweet at all. But there was like a pitch contest thing. And so I wrote like a couple sentences for it. It was like, when a succession contest turns deadly inside an Art Deco skyscraper, a disgraced Navy SEAL and his dog must, fight to survive to save his relationship with his daughter. I think that was like how I tried to sum up like the entire novel in like one sentence. Oh, and then I put like Squid Game times Dante's Inferno times John Wick. Like that was like the, if I was trying to give you like the aesthetic, like the flavor of it. So it's a recreation of Dante's Inferno in a skyscraper, all the different levels. And then a group of individuals that are going through almost like a reality show competition for leadership of this nonprofit foundation. It takes a deadly turn, and then it becomes, life and death. And then the protagonist and his allies have to kind of navigate through the end, and kind of work through all of their challenges. So I think that's like the quickest way I can describe it.
From the bit I've read, I never felt like I was inside the mind of a team guy, of a SEAL.
Yeah.
Like the way you articulated his psychology and his thought process, his whole vibe, his whole sense of life.
Yeah.
I'm fucking stoked to read the whole thing. So I can't wait to come out.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah. So it's still, I'm in the query trenches. Like it's rough to like just get lots of rejections. So it's like it's just part of the process as like a writer is like just getting rejected. But it actually like getting rejected is like, it's cool. Like I'm like on the process, I have something to be rejected for, right? Going through that is like, you just kind of got to develop thick skin and just not be too demoralized by it and kind of, realize like, hey, I've written a good novel. I'm waiting, I'm just finding the right moment for it to come out, and it'll, and that's where you just got to kind of be like, it's going to unfold the way it's going to unfold. And getting back to the stoicism, like, my locus of control is only so much. So I need to just focus on that.
Love it. Pivot a little bit. Basic. I love asking these questions. Workout program. Do you have 3 kids?
Yeah.
You just got out of 27 years. Do you have a workout program you're on right now, or just?
Yeah, it's definitely not as good as it could be. In the morning, I'll just do like light type calisthenics, like just with a kettlebell and some mobility stuff to like get ready for the day. I'm like mid 40s, so I'm just trying to like, after a body just destroyed
longevity right now.
Yeah, just body destroyed by a career. So yeah, so just like light calisthenics, and then I've been getting into like walking with a ruck now. Like I really enjoy that. So like try to go on like 5-mile rucks, whenever I can, and then what's cool about that, you can listen to podcasts, you can listen to music, and just think.
Do you carry a notebook? Do you got ideas and start?
No, but so what I'll do is it's like there's probably a more efficient process, but I'll like text myself on my watch. Like I'll be like, and it's like, and it's so embarrassing because I have to like say like my name incorrectly because it won't respond to it. If I say, so I have to be like, text Adam Karaoguz, and it'll send me a text like with my idea, and then I'll just like collect it later. It's probably a more efficient way to do that, but yeah, that's where I'm at right now.
What about technology? What's your relationship like with your smartphone, your Apple Watch? Do you set times at the end of the day? How do you regulate it?
This is a topic that I spend a lot of time like thinking about, just because the environment has just fractured humans' attention. So I rail about this in some of my writing. We're being drowned. Like I was telling you, like even when you're pumping your gas and there's like a commercial like blathering at you, that is just like such pollution of your mind and like giving you time to just have some peace and solitude. So I wanted to get rid of a smartphone, just get like, there's this thing called the light phone. I was going to get that.
You turned me on to that. I'm looking at it.
Yeah. So I thought about it, but like, I'll do a bunch of random Zooms. And so I like having the smartphone to do Zooms. My sense of direction is just straight embarrassing. It's like, I like, cringe to talk about it. It's just awful. So I do need, direction finding. And then I love like podcasts. I love like, informational YouTube videos. So what I did was like, I took email and all social media off of the smartphone. And so if I want to like even check my email, I have to like do it on my laptop. as you've talked about, like you're sitting at the stoplight and you're like, oh, I got to check this. Like, so I'm trying to like actively eliminate that. And then what I just did was my wife had an Apple Watch with a cell phone embedded in it and she wasn't using it. So I just stole it from her and like matched it to my account. So what I'm trying to do is just have like headphones and an Apple Watch and then just roll through life like that. And like not even like leave the house, like not even have a cell phone on me at all.
So you can text, you can call, but you can't get onto apps or whatever.
Yeah. So you can like listen to podcasts, you can listen to music, you can, get directions, text, phone call with all that.
But
so,
no internet.
Yeah. You can't like browse like Safari. That's my initial plan right now to further remove that from my life. Right. And then what I do is like at night, I have everything obviously like, put, no notifications. So that's not just, except for like, I'll let like, the wife and kids will be like the only message notifications that can kind of get through the wall. And then at night, like what I've been doing is like just leaving it in my office. Cause there's like, there was a point in my life where like I was important enough that like somebody needed to get in touch with me at midnight, but that period has passed. I'll just like leave my phone down in my office and it's like, hey, if it's that, I'll get it in the morning. Like there's nothing that's going to happen like right now that I need this tonight.
Was that hard for you to break or did that come naturally?
I mean, I think,
you were on call for a long time.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, initially like it was a challenge, but just realizing like there's nothing I need to respond to, after like 8 o'clock at night. Absolutely not. In bed, all I'm doing is like reading a book, and then I'm trying to like just read fiction, not even reading like nonfiction.
Nice.
So that you're like just calming your mind down a little bit. And then in the morning, like I'm trying to like not, check anything until I do like, a little morning routine of like reading, journaling, like nothing insane, just like.
I'm so bad at that. I need to do what you just said. Let's do some rapid fire to wrap it up.
All right.
So one person, alive or dead, you would want to have a conversation with and why?
Man, I would say, hey, I don't know. There's so many like ways you can go with this, but I would say like Lao Tzu,
Cool.
The guy who supposedly wrote the Tao Te Ching, like I would say him probably. That'd be kind of weird because he's like speaking Chinese and I'm like speaking English. We just like sit there and look at each other. And then I would say next would be like Alan Watts. I would like to sit and talk to him. Just a philosopher from the 60s and 70s.
Let's say top 3 books that have changed your life.
First, I'll go Tao Te Ching. For some reason that like really resonated with me. Like my grandparents had like a bookshelf in their basement and like that was on the bookcase. Because I didn't grow up like very religious at all, but like reading that, I'm like, wow, there's really something here that I'm attracted to. I think it's like a really interesting way to perceive reality. So every time I read that, I get more out of it. So I would say that. And then I would say Zen or Motorcycle Maintenance. I just really, really love that book. I probably read it 3 times, but yeah, it's amazing. And then the last one I would say is Shibumi. That one is kind of an action thriller. I think it's part of it's like where I found it. I found it on in the galley of a ship in the middle of the Indian Ocean. And it was almost like, I was like supposed to find this book. I'm like, oh, I need something to read. And then there's like this tattered copy of Shibumi. Yeah, that would be like the third one, I would say. Like, so yeah, 2 nonfiction and 1 fiction. Yeah.
Top 3 movies that changed your life.
I mean, there's so many like campy movies that I want to say right now. Like, I just love Big Trouble in Little China. Like, I'm like that is the most campiest, most ridiculous movie ever. But I'm like, if I could ever write Big Trouble in Little China, I would just die a happy man. But in terms of like serious movies, like I would say I love The Deer Hunter.
Weird as movies like that are not pro-war.
Right.
They make guys, made me want to go to war.
Right. No, they're absolutely, and that was like, I think that was the country just trying to process Vietnam. Yeah. Like it was just kind of starting to think about it then. But like any great piece of like, of art, it helps you see the world in a new way and like reframe it. So Apocalypse Now, like I don't want to make it like it seems like I'm like this is like Vietnam like war movies, but
that
like
was so good.
Yeah, but like
yeah.
So Apocalypse Now, like I don't know what it is about. I've watched it with guys on deployment, and you're like, smoking cigars, like watching that movie. There's just something about it that
it's giving me goosebumps thinking about that.
Yeah, no. So it's like that would be in that list. Also very partial to like Wes Anderson movies. I don't know why. Like my wife and I will definitely like watch. Yeah, we love all those because they're very like, I would say meta modern. Like they're trying to like, I don't know. There's something about them that we enjoy. But anyways, that would be like, that would be my list.
One piece of advice to an undesignated seaman. I think clean the bathrooms to drop bombs is probably one of the best things I've ever heard in my life. So like, what is one piece of advice you give to someone who's literally working the way up from the bottom right now?
Yeah, I think just, know where you want to go and then just work. I don't want that to sound like trite or cliched, but it's like, I talked to like a friend's baseball team and like, I was talking about like perseverance, and it's just like, anything that we do, like, you're going to suck in the beginning and it's going to take a lot of hard work to get there. So like, everything that we do, like there's very few things that you're like, oh, I'm naturally talented at this. Like it's so easy. Everything we do in life is just going to take a lot of work and get in the trenches. It can be demoralizing and like, you can want to like give up. And there are certain things you should give up. Like, so it's like, it's like hard to like find the nuanced, there's no absolute, like never give up. Like, well, there's some things like you probably should give up because you're not like, meant for that. So I would say know where you want to go and then, put in the work.
Where can people find you? What's your Substack? Where do you recommend they go?
Yeah. So yeah, I've got just a website that's just got like, I don't really update the website too much, but you can like sign up for the Substack on my website, which is adamkaraoguz.com. And then
I'll have your name spelled.
Yeah, which is Karaoguz. Yeah. And then I have a Substack. You can just look up like Renaissance Humans. And that's kind of like what I'm talking about. Like, I got tired of like, just complaining about things that were bad, and I'm like, I should just talk about like things that are good, and like I should just try to like manifest like the good that I want to see in the world. So just talk about humans that are prepared for reality and like mind, body, and spirit. So I think that's what I'm going for.
Rock and roll. You got anything else you want to add?
No, it's been great talking to you. Great to meet you in the flesh.
All right, appreciate it, bro. Thanks, man.
That's it for this episode. If you want to check out more from the podcast, head to zeroeyes.com/nobel, where you can see show notes, read more about our guests, and suggest guests or topics of your own. Until next time, stay in the fight. Don't ring the bell.